This model from China's BYD, the largest electric vehicle maker in the world, was launched in Mexico. BYD America's CEO Stella Li said the company aims to help every Mexican bring their first electric car home. BYD hopes to reach that goal by building a car factory that employs 6,000 local workers in Mexico. BYD is just one of thousands of Chinese companies that have flocked to the country in recent years, with investments in the market jumping nearly 600% from 2019 to 2022. Chinese car brands like Chang'an, JAC, and Geely account for 20% of Mexico's EV market share. Other expanding sectors include e-commerce, with consumers across Mexico now able to go online to access Chinese giants like Shein, Pinduoduo, and Alibaba, which owns the South China Morning Post. In December 2023, a China-Mexico air cargo route opened, connecting Shenzhen to Mexico City. Mexico is seeing what is being called a gold rush of investment from China. But the shift is not being welcomed by many in Mexico's neighbor, the United States.
The auto industry is being assassinated. They're going to be closing up and they're going to be building those cars in China and other places. Much of it's gone to Mexico.
When you make tactics like these, you're not competing, it's cheating.
美方指责中方采取所谓非市场行为，是典型的贼喊捉贼，倒打一耙。
As the mudslinging continues, Chinese companies have been seeking new ways to reach the U.S. market, with an eye on America's southern neighbor. Why is China investing in Mexico? The U.S.-China trade war started in 2018, when former U.S. President Donald Trump slapped more than $300 billion of import tariffs on Chinese goods.
This is the first of many. This is number one, but this is the first of many. This has been long in the making. You've heard many speeches by me and talks by me and interviews where I talk about unfair trade practices. But we have one particular problem, and that's China.
The following year saw even higher tariffs placed on more goods from China bound for the U.S. And the latest escalation came on May 14, 2024, when the Biden administration announced even higher tariffs aimed squarely at China's EVs.
We're not going to let China flood our market, making it impossible for American auto manufacturers to compete fairly. A 100% tariff on electric vehicles made in China.
For years, Chinese companies have sought another way out, which came through the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement.
Under the USMCA rules, most goods products can enter the US with no tariffs. The Chinese, they saw this as an opportunity to avoid the tariffs imposed by the US government by producing them, making them in Mexico, and then from Mexico exporting to the US.
Mexico welcomed foreign investment with open arms, incentivizing Chinese companies with tax breaks and free land grants. Many firms took up the offer, leading to what has been called nearshoring, or the practice of transferring a business operation to a nearby country, especially in preference to a more distant one.
The U.S.-China trade benefited Mexico a lot because Mexico became a key destination for the so-called nearshoring, where products that meet certain rules of origin may enter the U.S. market with zero tariffs.
Mexican states like Nuevo León saw over 2,000 new company registrations in 2022 alone. But Mexico's former ambassador to China, Jorge Guajardo, says investing in the country is not as straightforward as it sounds.
In order to qualify for the free trade agreement or tariff-free commerce, they need to meet local content requirements.
Like the Mexican law, they also have rules for like the percentage of people you can have from like overseas and the amount of like Mexicans that you need to hire locally.
Hiring locally means paying salaries that are twice as high as they are in markets in Southeast Asia.
In the fourth quarter of 2023, the average monthly income of a Vietnamese worker was around $290 according to the Vietnamese General Statistics Office. In January 2024, the average hourly wage in Mexico manufacturing sector was about $4.10, or more than $600 a month.
Aside from the cost, Chinese management has struggled with language and cultural barriers. Take the challenges faced by Chinese manufacturer Haitian, for example.
So Haitian is one of the few companies in Mexico that they have like a dorm that is similar to the dorm the Chinese usually have in China. And when the Chinese moved to the dorm, they don't stay there all the time due to like regulations that prevent them from living in the area. But when they were there, they would complain about the fact that the factory was so far away from everything that they would find like very difficult to eat. Like Mexican cuisine, it's very different from Chinese cuisine. And they were complaining a lot about this, and most of them didn't know how to cook. So what they did, they hired a woman from Mexico to cook the Chinese food, but she didn't know how to do it. And of course, she doesn't speak English or Chinese, but she was willing to learn. So the Chinese employees, they were the ones teaching her, God knows how, like with sign language, trying to communicate.
Companies have started to hire hybrid, local, and Chinese management teams to facilitate workplace cooperation, hold cultural exchange events, and train fresh graduates to introduce them early to Chinese work culture. While those challenges are being addressed, another one is looming. While its relations with China thrive, Mexico cannot afford to overlook the influence of the U.S., which imported 85% of Mexico's products in 2023.
If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line.
Presumed Republican presidential hopeful Trump has said he is dead set on severing any grip China may have on the U.S. economy if he wins the November election and a second, non-sequential term in the White House. Democratic incumbent Biden, however, has indicated a slightly different approach.
Trump and the MAGA Republicans want across-the-board tariffs on all imports from all countries if reelected. Well, that would drive up costs for families on an average of $1,500 per year each year. It simply doesn't get it. I want fair competition with China, not conflict.
Trump is also against multilateral deals with Mexico and Canada, like the USMCA, or an earlier version of the agreement known as the North American Free Trade Agreement.
Trump felt that the NAFTA agreement wasn't fair with Americans. So I would say that if Trump gets elected, things are going to be highly uncertain.
There is consensus among all of them that China may be a destabilizing factor for the USMCA and that none of them want to let that be the case.
A new round of USMCA negotiations will take place in 2026. As for who will lead the conversation from Washington, that depends on November's election results.
When it comes to Mexico, I think as long as they bring high-quality jobs and in good labor conditions and bring in research and development, etc., I think it's a net positive both for Mexico and for any country that invests in Mexico.